Greetings, YouTube. I should probably take these off. I was thinking about the adventures of my highest level character, Sir Lord Decan, Ranger Lord Decan. I did a video about him, his absurd character sheet, because he was a 26th level first edition character that had access to all kinds of unbelievably dangerous things. We used the rules that technology and magic would both function together. In some cases, technology doesn't work in the magic world. Sometimes magic doesn't work in the technological world. It all depends on how you want to do it, whether you want to have separate rules, you have transparency. It really is up to the GM. But there was a precedent for that from earlier Dungeons & Dragons, because you had like S3, which was a crashed spaceship, and you could pick up powered armor and lasers and stun grenades and stuff. So there was a precedent for having technology that worked in the world of D&D. And we kept to that. And over the course of the adventures, the entire party went to Gamma World at one point. I think we might have gone to the Horse Clans at one point too. My individual character, Takan, he went to some space opera high-tech place. It was kind of a amped up version of like the Fifth Element, kind of even more power and things like that. It was absurd. It was kind of a two-person game where I played my character and my buddy Al played a taxi driver from that world. This is before Fifth Element, so I don't think we stole that idea. And then the adventures we had therein. So the idea of having player characters with weapons that were outside the norm for a D&D campaign was well established, and we did. In fact, the portrait I have of him on the wall right here, which is a pencil, which is beautifully done, has a black Mark V pistol strapped to his hip, so he carried that everywhere. And one of the things we had picked up over time was a fusion bomb, a really high-tech fusion bomb, much more powerful than the kind of things that we have now in the size that it was, because it was a backpack-sized device, and but it was like the top tier energy output of the stuff we have today, maybe even higher. And I can't remember how we came together with this plan, but we had been in the GDQ, I think Q, the giant, the Drow, and I think it was the Q series of modules. So we were well aware that there was a city of Drow living beneath the earth. And I think at the time, there may have only been one. I know that in different histories of D&D, depending on what setting you're in, there are different Drow cities, and they have communications and trade and stuff like that. Just like there are different humans and dwarven cities and stuff like that, and fusion cities where everybody lives together. But I think at the time we had this kind of preconception that there was only one of these cities, and this huge cavern down there. And that's where all the Drow came from for the module series that we had played, which is still, I think, one of the greatest module series ever printed. I should probably do a talk about that. Some of that stuff in there is absurd, but it was so much fun. So it came into our minds that, if they're all in one place, why don't we take them out? So we worked our way down to the Drow City. And at the time, we were pretty high level. I don't think we were 26, but we were in the 15 to 20th level range. And we had, again, access to absurd amounts of magic items and artifacts and all kinds of stuff. So we were able to get there. And then we went to the ceiling of the cavern at the midpoint of the city. And we planted the fusion bomb at the midpoint of the city in the roof of the cavern. And then we set it up, set the timer on, click, and then we left. And then shortly thereafter, there was a very big boom. The earth shook everywhere for a very brief moment, above that zone. And essentially the entire city disappeared. Because what the bomb didn't destroy outright, the entire top of the cavern has collapsed. Now, at the time, we didn't think anything of that, because we were very much, they're evil, kill them. hadn't really gotten to the point where I began to question the whole concept of biological creatures having set alignments. In this point, I despise them. I can't. I love monster manuals, but when I read about like mortal beings that are sapient and they have coded, hard coded alignments, I just shake my head. I'm like, no, 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 no. That's just wrong. You can say that this society is aggressive, they're martial, they're expansionistic, and all these things could be true, but that doesn't necessarily make them evil. That makes them a lot like people. And depending on which side of that little expansion formula you're on is going to give you a much different perspective of how things are viewed. At the time of this recording, Vladimir Putin is currently trying to bomb the living hell out of Kyiv and take Ukraine. He's just stopped the advance because the Ukrainians are kicking his ass, and actually they have more tanks now than they did at the beginning of the war. But he just wants to reestablish the Soviet Union. That's his goal. So expansionistic, militaristic acts are not uncommon amongst us. And while I think it's evil, obviously the Russians don't. And we also didn't think about the fact that, there were lots of beings in that cavern that weren't Drow. Now, some of them are going to be like mind flayers and beholders and what have you. A plethora of evil creatures out there that have machinations on the world above them. There's going to be slave traders, but there's also going to be slaves, all of whom are innocent. Not to mention the children of the Drow and the children of the slaves, all innocent. And we just nuked their entire world and then crashed the cavern roof in on top of them. I have absolutely no idea how many would have survived that. We just kind of wrote it off as it's gone. Maybe we weren't being complex and subtle enough. Because let's face it, setting off a fusion device is not subtle. But now I look back upon that and I'm like, wow, we were not well. We very arbitrarily decided that a whole bunch of beings, sapient beings, who had never been given, their due justice in court, we just executed them. Tens of thousands of them, all at once. We wiped the city out. And I'm like, wow, that was messed up. It wasn't healthy. It wasn't a moral decision. But back then, bad guy, kill, was the word of the day. And even though I began to move further and further to that gray moral zone, which I lived in now, I never really thought about it until just recently. I mean, it popped back into my head for something else. I can't remember what the reasoning was. And bingo, I'm like, oh yeah, we did that thing, didn't we? So, yeah, we committed war crimes against the Drow. To the best of my knowledge, they never figured out who it was because they never came and retaliated. No other Drow ever came and retaliated. Lolth herself never sent anyone else after us to retaliate because, again, we weren't thinking of the complexities of the world and how it would actually work if you do something like that. There are always ramifications, and we did not take full advantage of them, which is, we left adventuring concepts on the table that we shouldn't have. There's a lot of meat there to chew on. We just didn't take it. We just didn't pick it up, and we should have. So yeah, so I guess the video is a bit of a confession that our characters did in fact commit war crimes against the Drow and could potentially have come close to committing genocide if in fact that was the only city that they lived in. And we killed so many innocent beings that had nothing to do with the Drow, that were not there of their own volition. But we just gone. Now maybe being dead's better than being a Drow slave, I'm not sure. But being freed would even be superior. And they never had that option. They never had their option to do it on their own. They never had any help to do it. We just snuffed them out. And that's messed up. However, I also want to open this up to, have you folks out there ever encountered a situation where, in retrospect, you committed war crimes against somebody, or you were preparing to do it, and somebody said, by the way, that's a war crime right there. I've been watching Gopher play Mass Effect 2, I think it is, and the one with the smoking man mystery dude. I can't remember who he is, but and he like uses incendiary rounds, and incendiary rounds are a violation of the Geneva Convention. And of course, you don't even think about that any more than we think about weapons or missiles that have a fire element, so they do damage. The arrow hits, and then you burst into flame because it's got the fire characteristic on it, and nobody bats an eye at that. But that could be viewed poorly. But we do it anyway, don't we? And we love it. So the moral ground that we stand on when it comes to D&D and other high fantasy games is, at best, shaky. So let's talk about that ground. And let's talk about how many war crimes have you committed and attempted to commit genocide against which people in D&D.